And aside from headlines and all of these things, what would you think is the greatest misconception about living in Jamaica, just day-to-day life?
That it's full of criminals and crime, and it's not a safe place to come. And unfortunately, the US State Department sometimes preaches that as well. When you look at don't go to Jamaica because it's an unsafe place, I think that's practically unfair and unjust and unreal.
Welcome to A Life Elsewhere, where we explore the stories of people who have left the familiar for the unknown. They have built lives far away from where it all began. I'm Jackson, and I'm speaking with Mark Shields, who in 2005 left a decorated career in policing in the UK for one of the most challenging roles imaginable, to be Deputy Commissioner of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. At a time when Jamaica was grappling with rising violent crime, political tension, and mistrust in the police, Mark stepped into the spotlight as a foreigner, a reformer, and a public figure in a country that was not his own. In this episode, we talk about how even after witnessing the country's most heinous crimes, he still chose to remain in Jamaica. Mark, thank you very much for coming here. I actually heard of you when you came to Jamaica, I think it was 2005. Mm-hmm. I was at school and I heard that you were coming to Jamaica. I don't know why. My dad used to always tell me to watch the news and listen and read the newspaper. He's always cussing me that I'm not aware enough of what is going on. Mm-hmm. And so for whatever reason, I guess at that time you must have been in the news because I knew. And then we fast forward however many years later and then I get to speak to you. So I'm very excited.
Thank you.
So you came to Jamaica to be the Deputy Commissioner at the JCF.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, before I was Deputy Commissioner of Police, I was working at Scotland Yard, New Scotland Yard. Okay. For those who don't know, that's the head of the Metropolitan Police Service in London. The headquarters is Scotland Yard, known as New Scotland Yard. And I had a pretty senior position there, investigating international drug trafficking, terrorism, different departments. It was very interesting work. And then I had an opportunity to come to Jamaica to investigate a senior police officer who had been accused of murdering 4 innocent people.
Okay.
I came with a team. I thought I'd be here for 2 weeks. It turned into 2 years almost. And at the end of that, the then Minister of National Security, Dr. Peter Phillips, called me to his office and I thought, well, I don't know what this is about. But then he offered me a job as Deputy Commissioner. Okay. And between the Jamaica government, the UK government and the private sector here, they funded for me to become Deputy Commissioner of Police for a period of time. Okay. I made a condition that if I did that, I wanted 4 ACPs, that's Assistant Commissioners of Police, because I realised there was quite a lot of work to do to modernise the JCF. There are lots of very, very old practices that I can give you examples of that would shock you. And so I said, yes, I'd come. And I ended up staying for 5 years in that particular post. Others stayed longer than me, but I thought 5 years was enough because it was a very challenging job, a very satisfying job in many ways, on the one hand, but very frustrating in other ways. And at the end of the 5 years, I said, no, I've done what I can, and that's it. And I've been here ever since.
So when you came for that initial 2 weeks that became 2 years, did you go back to the UK before taking on the 5 years?
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Before taking on the full-time role, I was back and forth on, BA 2262 to BA 2263, back and forth. And then eventually, it got longer periods and I stayed.
Before that first trip coming to Jamaica, had you visited before?
No. But there's a part A and part B to that. I've given you a shortened version of what happened.
Sure.
I actually came out here as a consultant initially from the police to look at crime, how crime was recorded, the intelligence system.
Right.
I did that and left. Right. So coming back to investigate is actually because they said, well, Mark, you've been there before.
Sure.
Can you do that? So that was probably 2002. Okay. So effectively, I've had a sort of 20-year relationship with Jamaica that started off as a courtship, and I ended up coming here and getting married to it almost, if I can put it like that.
And before the first time you ever came here, so it was for work, did you have impressions of Jamaica?
Yeah, I had impressions of Jamaica because I lived in Stoke Newington. I'd lived in Hackney. So
a few of us.
I knew quite a few Jamaicans. One sort, either friends or I was arresting them, depends which way it was going, if you see what I mean.
Sure.
Yes.
And so when you arrived, did you feel Did you feel that it was somewhere that you could live when you arrived?
No, not really. I think I've always described Jamaica as being like Marmite.
Okay.
Love it or hate it, or maybe Guinness, where you hate Marmite. I love Marmite.
Okay, babes, real talk, tantrums do not look fun. But what if I told you that they don't have to take over your house? In my course, Managing Tantrums Like a CEO, I'll teach you the strategies that turn tantrums into opportunities. No yelling, no bribes, no screens, and no chaos. You will learn how to understand what's really going on behind those meltdowns, how to keep your cool when they lose theirs, and how to raise emotionally intelligent children without losing yourself in the process. Because CEOs don't react, babes, they respond, and you can do the same. So if you're ready to bring more calm, connection, and confidence to your home, click the link and check out Manage Tantrums Like a CEO.
Marmite.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people that came to Jamaica were of that opinion.
Right.
That they come here and they found it a bit too much in their face, a bit too much. There's a level of disorder here, which some people, such as me, can find that quite nice. We like it. We feel comfortable with it to a degree.
Sure.
But others they can't deal with the disorder and the way things are here, and they just leave,
right.
Which is fine. You know, I respect that. But other people come here, and I've got many British friends and friends from other parts of the world who have come here, absolutely love Jamaica, and they don't leave.
Sure.
So there really are two groups.
I feel like that is Jamaican culture, as in like the people. I tell people a lot of time, like we live on either end of the spectrum. I don't feel like, for example, in England, I think many people can kind of live on middle ground. You know, you don't go too high, you don't go too low. Whereas I just feel like Jamaicans don't really do that.
No, it's that culturally they're different to the people in the United Kingdom.
In what way?
As I said, there's Jamaicans do not like to be restricted too much, those who stay here.
Right.
There is a level here of disorder that is just on the verge of being acceptable and becomes unacceptable.
Right.
I can give examples of that. You will go from here to Ligony, and you'll at least see 2 or 3 guys having a piss in the street.
Right.
That does not happen in London. It does not happen in Florida. Those things don't happen.
Sure.
If you get to a red light here, you'll stop at the red light. And if you're the first in the line, then when the light goes red, these people coming this way find it optional that they might stop or they might not. So you have to sit there and wait for the rest of the red light jumpers to jump their light before you go.
Sure.
You'll get to a traffic intersection and there's no idea about a yellow box. Everybody's doing this and everybody's blasting their horn. And so they're the things that drive people crazy to some degree. Whereas if you're in London, New York, Miami, if it's a red light, you stop.
Right.
You don't piss in the street. You don't do certain other things. You don't throw your litter, your garbage out of the car into the gully or whatever.
Yes.
So there are things here which they're not acceptable, but people live with. But that, on the other hand, there are extreme advantages of living here, which are the culture, generally speaking. People are very friendly. People are very laid back. They're genuine. And so there are lots of good things. Jamaicans can't tolerate, people who are from Jamaica say, I cannot believe, what it's like here. Some of them leave. You probably know that quite a high percentage of Jamaicans leave, not just because they can find work elsewhere, but they just want that order, that sense of order that isn't always here. I think that's really it.
When you came, did you come with family?
No, I came on the verge of a divorce and got divorced whilst I was here. And then I remarried when I got to Jamaica some years later.
Okay. And when you started working, how tall are you?
6'6".
6'6". You're not small, right?
No.
Right. You're 6'6", blonde, blue eyes, white guy from England.
Blonde?
Yeah.
When was the last time you had your eyes tested? This is grey. I wish it was blonde, because they joke that my hair's blonde. No, it's not, Mr. Shields. It's grey.
But you have a clearly distinctive English accent, and you're coming to work inside the police force in Jamaica. Did you feel that was well received? Did you feel that there was some resentment? What was the culture like?
It was all of the above.
Okay.
A percentage of the Jamaica Constabulary Force accepted me, supported what we were trying to do, and wanted change.
Okay.
They really wanted change because they realised how far they had to come for this position, this transformation of the JCF, which they talk about today, and I'll come to that in a minute. I think there was probably a higher percentage, including at senior ranks, that just didn't want us there at all. The level of corruption was quite high. The level of fatal shootings was out of control. There was no checks and balances around any of that. So it was quite a hard environment. However, the public, the people of Jamaica, absolutely welcomed me. They welcomed my colleagues. And even today, when I came into this building, the woman downstairs, even though I left in 2009, she said, "What's your name?" I said, "Shields." She said, "What's your first name?" I said, "Mark Shields." She said, "You're Mark Shields?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Mark Shields." She said, "Oh, it's really nice to meet you for the first time." And I get that all of the time.
Sure.
Even after all this time. I've never really had any negative criticism from Jamaican people.
Sure.
They have, both in terms of diaspora and here, welcomed us coming here. Although I said I did my 5 years and left. We put our plans into place. That has now, the force has been transformed. There have been numerous changes which are positive. Technology has arrived. Crime scenes are managed more properly than they used to be. Lots of things have changed for the better. There's still a long way to go. Sure. But it's incredibly better than it was. Is that right? Incredibly better, can I say? It's much better than it was.
It's incredibly better.
It does actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll use that again. No, it's a lot better than it was.
Sure.
But it was tough. That first year, I'll give you two examples. You know what an exhibit bag is? You can imagine, because you've watched crime programs.
Yeah, Law and Order.
Law and Order, and you've got something that's an exhibit,
right? And
you pick it up, or you don't pick it up, you get whatever it is, and you put it into an exhibits bag.
Sure.
When I first came here in the early 2000s, an exhibit bag was a brown paper bag, which you'd fold over the end, and then you'd put a wax seal on it, which is the equivalent to the thing you'd see if you're watching something to do with Napoleon, a wax seal, literally. So we introduced exhibit bags. These are really simple examples. When I came here, a crime scene was photographed in black and white.
Okay.
A post-mortem was photographed in black and white. Now, as you can imagine, you get no sense of bruising, colour, or anything, or abrasion from black and white.
Sure.
So within the first year, we introduced proper exhibit bags.
Right.
We introduced colour photography. They're the simple things. They were, as people love to say, low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
There were lots of other things that were done in the background, some of which the public would never have seen. But there were some significant changes. The way crime was recorded, the way we investigated crime, forming a major investigation task force rather than individual offices and detectives having huge caseloads of murders, etc. And all of that has taken a lot longer than I hoped, but I think we planted the seed, but we're not going to take all of the credit because things have moved on since then significantly.
And when you first came, is there anything that, like, just in your day-to-day living experience that shocked you culturally? I'm not talking from a work perspective. I mean, the fact that you've decided to move to Jamaica, you've decided to spend some time here. Is there anything that was unexpected?
No, I don't think there's anything unexpected. I think that, let's say, from a work perspective, being one of the only white males, and clearly from London with a London accent as opposed to a Jamaican accent, I would go to a crime scene and I'd be suited up with my tie on. I wouldn't necessarily wear body armour. So I was quite high profile in that way. But as I said, I was accepted. So it wasn't that difficult. And when I was not at work, people looked after me. I was generally looked after because people were quite happy I was here.
Sure.
So culturally, there wasn't that much difference at that level. I think, on these superficial issues that I've mentioned before, there are big differences, but there's so much going for Jamaica in terms of, sport, music, just the countryside, the fact that there are beaches and a relatively clean sea and everything that goes with it. There is fresh fruit. There are lots of good things about this country that I've come to love.
Is there a big difference, obviously surface level, between policing in the UK and policing in Jamaica?
The answer to that is there shouldn't be, because policing is a bit like carrying out, if you imagine a murder investigation is a bit like somebody with a heart problem. Okay. You go in to see a surgeon, and whether you see a surgeon in Jamaica or London, that procedure of fixing a heart is the same. If you're going to a crime scene and somebody has been murdered,
Right.
then the procedure should be the same in terms of what you're doing. You know, containing the scene, keeping it uncontaminated, having an officer that takes names of everybody going onto that crime scene. When I first came here, there was no crime scene tape. People were trampling all over the scene. People are coming up and looking at, you know, what's going on.
Sure.
There was no control, whereas in the UK, we're very disciplined around that.
Okay.
It has now improved a lot. Still make mistakes here from time to time, but generally speaking. So they're the sort of differences that I would say that were there.
And then when you decided to walk away from the force, did you consider that it was time to go home at that point?
No, because by that time I'd met my wife. My daughter was born the same year that I left the force and started my own company. My wife is a broadcast journalist. She's quite well known in Jamaica. She's now also got her own law firm as well. She's an attorney at law. And so although perhaps I would like to have gone back, it would have been unfair to her if I was coming to the end of my career, say, oh, by the way, forget whatever you're doing now, you're leaving, you're coming with me back.
She could go be an attorney.
Well, she could, but it wouldn't really have been fair. And I was quite happy here. I wanted to set up a company here, my own company.
Okay.
I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but I was always, I think, a frustrated entrepreneur who never had the courage to leave policing and go out and do something. And so it wasn't until I got to the end of my policing career, I said, right, this is it. I want to go and do my own thing. I don't want to go and work for Amex or for Barclaycard or whatever it was. I want to start my own company. So that's what I did.
And what did you start?
I started a company called Shields Crime and Security. And we were a classic security company. We provide the services that other security companies do. I believe we do it to a very high level. And judging by our clients, I think that's true. I'm a strong believer in technology as opposed to relying on people to do things around security. And so my focus is on that. It's on cameras. It's on other forms of detection of crime and prevention of crime.
And when you say your clients, it's corporate clients?
It's both, really. It's both, but it's mainly corporate clients. We work with hotels. We work with industry. We work with commerce. All sorts, really. I was actually, before I came here today, I was at an apartment block in Kingston, which is a very high-end apartment block, and I think we'll be providing security there and changing the cameras, because the cameras that we use are from an American company called Verkada, Verkada, and they are second to none because they're facial recognition, vehicle recognition. If you imagine at the moment, again, go back to a TV program and they say, well, we'll look at this camera. We know that something happened in the last 6 hours. And they will sit there and just go through the footage. I can actually ask my cameras a question. Can you show me every FedEx vehicle here in the last 3 hours?
Very cool.
Can you show me every person or, say, male with a yellow backpack? And they'll just come up. So if you've got a crime situation where the victim says, well, all I can tell you is he had a yellow backpack and he went in that direction, I can bring up my cameras and show you every person with a yellow backpack in a particular time zone.
Do you think that the JCF needs to use more technology?
Absolutely. They are already.
I read the other day that they're going to add cameras all over the place. And I thought it was a really good thing.
No, it's good. It's excellent. They have a thing called Jamaica Eye. And again, when I was here, there was nothing like Jamaica Eye. We now have Jamaica Eye. There are cameras.
What is Jamaica Eye?
It's an integrated camera system for the police in order that they can monitor particular areas and crime hotspots. It's good. In my view, it could be better, but it's good. It's good, and it's a lot better than having nothing at all.
Very true. I hope that we don't get the orange box traffic light cameras.
Why?
Everywhere.
What?
Because it would make me a bit sad.
But it would also save about 300 lives a year.
Is that how many people have car accidents?
If you think about it, on average, there are between 400 and 450 people killed per year. If you take the same size population would be Ireland. It's about 3 million people. They probably have about 40 people killed a year.
On the roads. Yeah, we do.
The reason is that they have these yellow box cameras everywhere.
So they have the yellow box camera.
They do. In fact, that's something that I've been proposing for the last 10 years.
Why haven't they brought it sooner?
Well, they have an amended Road Traffic Act, but they haven't got the regulations sorted out to support that sort of thing. You know what I mentioned earlier on about you sit there and people wait, it's an option as to whether or not they're going to stop at a red light. That is really dangerous, and that's where people get killed. Those cameras In fact, I introduced those cameras to Jamaica as a study
Sure.
about 5 years ago.
Right.
And we identified hundreds of offences that would have, one, prevented crashes, reduced the number of incidents of disorder on the road.
Sure.
Have you driven on the North Coast Highway yet?
Yes.
You know what it's like? It's a nightmare. Every time I go to Montego Bay, and for everybody else, it's stress.
Right.
It's absolute stress because people drive crazy here.
Sure. Apparently, I learned that in Ivory Coast, they drive worse. I was just told this yesterday.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I was surprised to find out because I always say if you know how to drive in Jamaica, you can drive anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
But apparently, Ivory Coast is worse.
The interesting thing is, though, I go back to that disorder thing.
Yeah.
When Jamaicans go to Florida and
Yeah.
London, they don't do all that rubbish that they do
conform,
here. They
yeah.
conform, and they're perfect. They
They don't
just do
want
what
a
they're supposed to.
£75 ticket. from
Exactly. So why can't we have that here? Why is it that we, visitors, Jamaicans, permanent residents, have to live with that state of disorder that is so easy to cure?
Because some people like smiling with the police officer and continuing on their
Maybe
way.
that's what it is. That's what it is. Maybe that's what it is.
But do you think that in general there is a relaxed attitude from the public regarding crime, not just road traffic, but in general?
Yeah, I think generally speaking there is a relaxed attitude, but people here have had enough. People here are sick of 1,000 murders a year, which is going to be reduced this year, it would seem. People are sick of disorder and crime, and they want to live in this beautiful island where it's not being polluted by garbage, which is just thrown out. They want to drive on streets that have no potholes, where people are not driving on the wrong side of the road to get round traffic,
Sure.
where the taxi drivers are obeying the rest of the laws that everybody else is. Because all of that stuff, despite this is a beautiful island, causes stress.
Yeah.
And it's just too much. As I said, you drive from Kingston to Montego Bay, and by the time you get there, you're wrecked mentally because it's almost like a computer game, dodging all of the incidents that could happen that could kill you. And people die on those roads literally every day. It's bad.
You have a career that has clearly seen the worst of the worst, yet you still live here. And I guess in my mind, we're like, but you could live anywhere.
Yes, but go back to the part that I've said. I focused recently on the negative side. But I've said there are many good reasons to live here.
Okay.
Politically, it's stable. And I will give you an example. The United Kingdom, since 2015, has had 5 prime ministers.
Right.
We've had 1 prime minister here.
Is that good or bad?
Well, I think it's pretty good because what we haven't had in the United Kingdom since before 2015 is political stability.
Right.
We had this thing called Brexit, which you're aware of, where we voted to leave the European Union.
Yep.
It's created this divisiveness within the United Kingdom, those who wanted to leave and those who wanted to stay. Unfortunately, it was my generation mainly that voted to leave, which is absolute stupidity. No, because I voted to stay, of course. I'm a European, first and foremost.
Sure.
But it's caused this diversity, and I think in some ways in the UK, it's become a very intolerant place. I believe that racism has been on the rise. So the intolerance, the racism, the divisiveness in politics, and the economy, which is an absolute disaster because of austerity and all the other measures that came into place. In the meantime, Jamaica 20 years ago, massive debt against GDP, political instability. It was on the verge of bankruptcy. The IMF came in, that's the International Monetary Fund came in, and they marshalled the economy back to where it is. We've had Dr. Nigel Clark, who was the Minister of Finance. Prior to that, Peter Phillips, when he was P&P. They have gone through a course of creating financial stability, which has enabled things like the police to buy all this extra kit they've now got to protect the island. And I've noticed here that we've got this flip-flop. The UK had political stability when I left it. Jamaica had complete instability in so many ways. And now I look at the UK and I think you should be a bit more like Jamaica. And in fact, the way the economy has been developed, I think, has been commended by the IMF and by others in terms of how they've turned the economy around. So there are lots of good things here that have happened. I'm not particularly JLP or PNP. I just look at the last 10 years and say objectively, things have definitely got better. Crime has been reduced. more money is available for the poorer people in society. We're nowhere near where the UK is in terms of that, but things are better. So I'd rather be here at the moment than I would in the United Kingdom.
And do you think that Jamaica is your home, like your forever home, or do you still sometimes feel like I'd like to move back to the UK?
That's a very interesting question, because it's a question I ask myself frequently, and I still haven't got a definitive answer on that. I like to go back to my home, back to the United Kingdom. I've got friends there. And more importantly, I have family there. And although we live in different pockets, I've got family in Germany, family in the UK, and some family here. I don't know. I think as long as I can afford to travel back to the United Kingdom regularly, I feel happy to do that and live here. And equally, I probably couldn't afford a house in the UK, United Kingdom now. My friends that, let's say, my counterparts of my age group bought property back in the late 70s and the early 80s. We bought property then. And one of my dearest friends is selling her house for £1.9 million. Now, that's a ridiculous sum of money. We are not millionaire people. We're not people that would consider ourselves to be millionaires. But I know many of my friends, in fact, one particular friend of mine, she said to me, this couple of years ago, Mark, she said, I'm so grateful to you. I said, why is that? She said, back in whenever it was, you persuaded me to buy my house in Epping. Epping in North London.
It's on the end of the line,
it's
right?
like Epping is Epping Forest into Essex. So she bought her house there, and she said, you'll never guess what, my house is now worth over £1 million. She said, it's just unbelievable. So if you live here, where property prices are not cheap, but to actually leave here, sell up and go back and buy a property in the UK, it's not prohibitive. No, it's not. No.
Going back to you deciding to stay, did your friends who are in the UK think that you were taking a step back in your career? Because sometimes when you speak to people who live abroad and they're like, oh, I'm coming to Jamaica, there's this misconception that you're going backwards.
No, I let people down. I think professionally, when I was working at Scotland Yard, I had a really good career mapped out. I probably would have gone, somewhat further. I wouldn't necessarily become Commissioner of Police. I'm not saying that. But there was a lot I could have done in that extra 5 years. And I think some of my colleagues were disappointed that I left and went to Jamaica. And indeed, friends and family were disappointed that I made that decision as well. So that is a regret in some ways. That is a regret. But we all reach crossroads in our lives, and you go down a particular path and you make that decision. I would never have thought 25 years ago or 20 years ago I would end up sitting here talking to you, having lived in Jamaica for nearly 20 years. It's unbelievable. It's a long time. Yeah.
And when you look back on your time, you speak about people respecting you because of clearly you have done so much for the JCF. Is there anything that you wish you could have achieved during your time that you didn't? I
just wish things had moved faster than they did. And there are a number of factors around that. One is change in any organisation is always slow and difficult. And because there are cultural differences, that probably slowed it down even more. I know for a fact there are some things that I said that we should be doing this, and I left, and suddenly it was somebody else locally's idea. And it was a great idea. So that's good. I don't mind that, because we know, as I said, we moved on so far. So my regrets are that things took longer than I expected, because I think this country could get so much further in terms of getting on top of crime, getting on top of disorder, social disorder. I think, we could have moved a long way. But then I go back to the UK again, and you look at the knife crime, the disorder there is in particular communities. The fact that even when somebody is taken to court, if they get to court, it can take 2 or 3 years for people to find justice. So you can't ever look at Europe, or let's focus on the United Kingdom and say, well, it's perfect over there, and Jamaica's a complete mess. That is not true. There are so many things here that are taking time, that it's an improving country. You see it. If you've been here before, as you obviously have been, you said that to me, and you've seen how it's developed since you were last here and from when you were young here. It's changed a lot. Wherever you go, whatever you do in life, there's going to be a regret, but you can't always look back. You have to look to the future, say, I've made decisions, this is where I'm going. And the question you asked me, am I going to go home for good? I don't know yet. I just haven't made that decision. because there's good on both sides.
Sure. Was there ever a day that you went to work and you thought, what the fuck am I doing here in this place?
That happened most weeks. Yeah. No, seriously. I luckily had 2 or 3 mentors.
Okay.
One of them I'll mention by name, but unfortunately he passed away. That was Oliver Clark.
Okay.
And he was the chairman of Jamaica National.
Yeah.
He owned the Gleaner newspaper.
Yeah.
And he was one of the people who brought me here in the first place. He was a mentor, a friend, someone I could go to and talk to. And I used to say, what the hell am I doing here? You know, Oliver, I just need to go now. It's just not going to work. And you calm me down and say, no, you know, you've got to do this and you're doing it for the right thing. And he was such a fantastic man. And there were a number of other people like Oliver who I could go to in my hour of need and say, what the fuck am I doing here? And I calm down and I think, no, we've achieved this, we do that and we move on. And I think the momentum that kept me here was certain individuals like Oliver, but also I think more than that, the people here as well, the people, because I got so much support from just the man and woman on the street.
Yep.
That was the thing that kept me here really. And it's kept me here still because they haven't forgotten it. And I find that incredible because I left in 2009. We're in 2020.
When you said that, I thought it was like the other day.
No, it was 2009. But people still treat me with a great deal of respect and admiration. And I'm not saying that as a big-headed... I'm just saying... I'm saying that that's how people make me feel. Yeah. And that's a real honour. Yeah. It really is.
Do you think that had you stayed in the UK, you were clearly a high-ranking officer in the New Scotland Yard. Do you think that you would have received the same respect? Or is it because you initiated so much change?
I think it's because I was so different. Right. Because I came from the UK. I was white. I'm from the UK, so I was completely different here. Whereas in London, I was doing a great job. And so maybe internally, there were those of us who were, you know, doing a good job. And they'd always come to me and others and say, look, this has come up, deal with it. Which was always, I guess, an honour, but it's because we did a good job. But we were many fish in one tank, whereas here, I was a bit of an odd fish in a smaller tank, so I was sort of more visible. Sure.
Yeah. One of the times I was here on holiday, I was at Iberostar in Montego Bay, and there were lots of headlines, BBC, ITV, Sky News, and they were saying that because there had been a state of emergency called in St. James at the time, they were reporting that the tourists were being locked in their rooms and were told not to go anywhere. And I thought this was really strange because I was here at the time. And so I did an innocent video of me just out and about in Montego Bay, and I thought this is really weird because I don't feel anything. That day I'd done interviews with all of them to basically say that I think the way crime is reported in Jamaica is irresponsible because, of course, I'm not saying don't report crime, but a lot of times there's headlines that will blast out that we're all scared to leave our houses. And I just wondered, do you ever feel protective over Jamaica's reputation? Because obviously you have an insider's perspective. It's kind of like a weird inside-outside perspective. Or
I am very protective in that way of Jamaica, and I will protect it. And if anyone says, I wouldn't go there, it's too dangerous, I'd say, excuse me, where do you come from? They say, well, I'm from New York. I say, well, I wouldn't go to the Bronx, quite honestly, because there are areas like that. There are areas in Birmingham, in the UK, there are areas in London, you do not want to go at night.
Sure.
And the fact is that most people come here. In fact, in terms of tourism and business people visiting Jamaica, when was the last time you heard about a tourist or a business person being murdered here? It happens. I'm not going to hide it and say, oh, it never happens.
Sure.
But let's look at the proportionality of it. Most serious crime that happens in Jamaica happens within gangs. It's gang on gang. It's the same in the United Kingdom. When you hear about knife crime, look at the perpetrator and look at the victim. They tend to be the same age group, living in the same area.
Sure.
And that's where the crime is. But if you're going into London, the worst thing that can probably happen is you're going to get your phone stolen because you've got these electric bikes now. They'll come along, you've got the bike and they'll snatch it.
Yep.
Here, yes, there are robberies here. Yes, my car has been broken into. Yes, people's houses get broken into. But it is not exceptionally bad compared with other places.
Sure.
But in terms of violent crime, absolutely. I think the way women are treated here is a bit different to the United Kingdom.
In what way?
I think the levels of sexism here are a bit greater in some ways within certain communities.
It's really interesting.
I think women are, you imagine where we were, say, 20 years ago in the United Kingdom, when you open page, do you know what page 3 of The Sun would be?
Katie Price, right?
Yeah, it would be
topless
women, where women were objectified?
Yep.
That's the word, isn't it?
Yep.
I think to a degree there's still a lot of that here, sexualized. And I think we've got a long way to go to respecting women in some quarters here.
See, I find this deeply interesting, right? Because, so I left Jamaica 9 years ago, and I go to England and I open up my restaurant, right? And people will come in, whether it's sales reps or, you know, neighbors, and they're selling literal frozen fries. This is not a deeply intellectual conversation. This is not like high stakes decision making. And I would be sitting with a male customer who's a friend of mine in my restaurant, and immediately the person comes and they don't speak to me. They don't make eye contact because he must be the owner of the restaurant. And I'm like, this is so bizarre, because again, you think first world, you think advancement, and you're just like, what? And I've always said that my experiences here, in terms of in business context, would always be ageist. It would always be, I just come out of school from New York. It was like, babes, go get some experience before you come and you want to make ideas. But I always felt that the UK has been more sexist.
But then on the other hand, you see that I'll flip this argument now, because when you look at most businesses in this country, and most senior positions, they're run by women.
Right.
The majority of really responsible jobs, they're women.
Yes.
And men here, for some reason, do not do as well at school. They drop out from school. The women go out to work. The women bring up the kids, and the men, for whatever reason, do not appear to be able to stay with the women. That breeds resentment sometimes, and you can end up getting abuse and all sorts of other issues coming out. Again, none of this is, you can paint one thing about everybody. These are general things that we see, but there is a lot of that here. But as you mentioned, you can also get that in the United Kingdom as well.
It's really interesting. Do you feel a part of Jamaican culture, or do you always feel like an outsider?
I 100% never feel like an outsider.
Okay.
I feel like an Englishman who lives in Jamaica for 20 years and has been accepted. There will always be, culturally, there will always be differences. There are things that I wouldn't go to or see because it's not my culture.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. It's a bit like going to church.
Okay.
If you go to church and you're used to going to church and standing up and singing and dancing and you know, just having a good time, but it's still praise and worship and everything else. But on the other hand, you're used to going to an Anglican church where it's far more conservative, and you sit and you pray and you stand up, sing a hymn, sit down. Some people like that and some people like that. And I find that being in Jamaica, there are aspects that are a bit like church. Some are conservatives, some are not so conservative.
Sure.
Am I making a point?
Perfect sense.
Oh, good. I might be talking gibberish, but honestly, I understand what I'm saying. Hopefully your audience will.
So your daughter, does she feel Jamaican with an influence of British culture in your home? How does that play out?
That's very interesting. My daughter has lived a whole life in Jamaica.
Yeah.
But she has an English accent. Really? Although she goes to school with Jamaican kids every day. She sees herself in some ways as English, not Jamaican. It's very strange, and I don't know why.
That's really
she has a black mother and a white father, and she's brown.
Right.
But she puts, well, it doesn't even put it on. She has an English accent, and she doesn't understand patois, although she's lived her all her life.
Okay.
And
what school did she go to?
She goes to a local school here, a little private school, nothing special. She went to Hillel for a while, but that didn't work out.
Okay. Everyone keeps telling me that Hillel's not working out. That's where I went. Why is Hillel not working out?
That's an interesting question. I think you'd have to ask some of the other parents and kids that do go to Hillel or have dropped out.
Why did you take her out of Hillel?
I think there's a lot of peer pressure there in one way or another. There's a very strong, as there is in many schools, a very strong cell phone, social media culture.
I was concerned about that.
There's a level of cultural bullying
Okay.
That is not just Hillel. So I'm not having a dig at Hillel.
No, this is
there
just
are
my
many,
own
many good
personal,
things about Hillel. I thought it was a great school.
Okay.
And I still think it's a great school,
Okay.
but it didn't suit my daughter. She needed to go to a smaller environment.
Sure.
And she's getting a lot
bigger
better.
now? So when I went, the class size was like 17.
They're still relatively small classes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not about class size alone. There are a lot of other aspects, and I think it's a bit like anything. Some kids will fit into a big school and do well and thrive at Hillel, others won't. So I'm not criticising any particular school.
It's because everyone that I've spoken to, everyone has said the same thing.
Really?
That Hillel's not the Hillel that I went to.
Yeah.
I've tried to set up an appointment literally because I want to see.
I think there is something, you know what Upper St Andrew is like? If I could be honest, so this is probably got a few people from Upper St Andrew will hate me for this.
Right.
But don't forget the kids here, they grow up in an environment where there's a housekeeper and helpers, and there might be a cook, there'll be a gardener. They've never washed a car.
Right.
They've never ironed.
Yep.
They've never done the washing up after a meal.
Sure.
And there is a sense from some from Upper St Andrew, some but not all, of entitlement. There's this sense of entitlement. Well, I don't do that. I don't do the washing up. I have a helper to do that.
Yeah.
I've got guys of my age who I've been out with from Jamaica, and they said, boy, Mark, you know, it was really tough because when I went off to Boston to university, I didn't know how to use a washing machine.
Yes.
I've never ironed or pressed a they say pressed a shirt.
Yes.
I've never pressed a shirt. And they had to learn all of that at the age of 18, 19, 20, because for their whole lives, they've relied on that. So this sense of entitlement can actually go and transition itself into a school.
Sure.
So you go to school and it's almost like, well, don't you know, my dad owns this particular company.
Yes.
And I'm his son, and don't you speak to me like that.
Right.
Whether that was the sense of some of them.
Sure.
Or some kids from those areas.
To be fair, I think I have one friend for that reason. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going where you want it to go in terms of...
No, I'm genuinely just interested.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever think about educating your daughter in England? Some people have this perception that...
Sending her away to boarding school?
Yeah.
I couldn't have afforded that anyway. And I actually, no, I would have disagreed with that because I think a part of education and growing up is to be with your parents and with your family.
Okay.
And I don't think sending kids away is necessarily the right thing to do.
Okay.
And I think if you look at the UK model and you look at some of the brutal people that have come out of that sending them away to boarding school, people, you know, like Boris Johnson, God knows who else, and Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah.
They're not normal. They were sent away as these border boys at 6, 7 years old with a stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
And they're not well-formed people.
Yeah.
They're not.
If anybody was thinking about moving to Jamaica now, what would you say to them?
I say go for it. Yeah. I think there are a lot of opportunities here. Come with an open mind. Know it's going to be difficult. It's not easy to start a business here.
Okay.
There's a lot of bureaucracy still, and then you've got to find the right people to do the job as well. And one of my toughest things is finding people.
Okay.
Interviewing people and getting the right people into my firm to make it grow.
Sure.
It's really tough. But I would say, yeah, if you've got an idea and you want to come here, then come.
You speak like quite optimistic. Is it fair to say you feel quite optimistic about the future?
I'm an optimist.
Or that's just you anyway?
No, I think it's partly me.
Yep.
But I think in balance, I've been pessimistic and said about the downside.
Sure.
But I'm actually saying optimistically, yeah, I would still come here and do what we can do.
When you say the downside, I don't think that's pessimism. I just think you're being honest about the
negative side.
Yeah, but I don't see that as pessimistic. But your energy feels quite optimistic. So I'm just wondering if that is how you are with everything, or should I also feel hopeful and buy into your hope?
It's probably a bit of both.
Yeah?
I think it's a bit of both here. I'm an optimist, and I probably would lead you astray through my optimism and say, do this, yeah, we're going to do that, we can do it, we can get there. That's me, yeah. But, so it's not for the faint-hearted. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, I said people can come here and absolutely hate it.
Yes.
And so some people will come here and hate it, and others come here and they absolutely love it. There are many people from Jamaica who left at a young age and go off and make their money in the United States, United Kingdom. They might just be, decide to be a bus driver.
Sure.
And they've made some money, they want to come home. Others have gone off, created a huge company, want to come home, and they're quite disappointed.
Okay.
because it's not looking at Jamaica from the United States, from Canada and the UK, and visiting here now and again is not the same as coming back to live here. And I think that sometimes the returning residents can be quite disappointed by what they see.
Sure.
And in the past, it's been quite a dangerous thing as well.
Okay.
Quite a few returning residents have ended up targeted and ended up as victims of crime.
Okay. But you said in the past, so I'm hoping that that's better?
I think it's slightly better, but it's not completely better.
Okay.
So I would say to anyone that's thinking of coming back here, do your due diligence. If someone has said, I have a plot of land and I'm going to build a house for you,
Sure.
then check that it is a plot of land that they have proper registration, legitimacy to, they can sell it to you. Check that if you're giving money to that person to build a house, that it's legitimate.
Sure.
Because there are many people here who have lost thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars
Sure.
through fraud. It's a big
thing.
place for fraud.
And personally, without work, how do you think living in Jamaica for 20 years has changed you?
That's an interesting question.
I have a few bits.
I don't think I've changed that much.
Okay.
I think I was already formed in a particular shape in my first 45 years. So the next 20 years,
Right.
I'm already that shape.
Okay.
And so I might be a little bit malleable, but I am what I am.
Sure.
I am the same person basically that I was prior to getting here. I've had to adapt a little bit because I'm living in a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
Although, as I said, I lived in Stoke Newington, lived in Hackney. It's not that I haven't been involved in other cultures, whether it's Indian, Jamaican, Jewish, whatever it is.
Sure.
I've always lived with lots of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been that sort of a person. I'm not particularly in a particular groove with my white people.
Sure.
I'm quite happy to live in a multicultural society. That's what I'm trying to say.
Do you think that London is multicultural?
Absolutely.
I don't.
I think it's multicultural, but
The reason I don't think it's multicultural is
Yes.
because, again, coming from a Jamaican perspective, the first time I go to boarding school, I'm 16. And at my boarding school, I realized that whenever I visited London, the Indian community wouldn't really talk to me. There was a weird tension, right? And again, coming from Jamaica, where my best friend is visually Indian, I come home and I said, Steph, you're Indian. I know it might sound silly, but I never thought of him as Indian. He was just my friend Steph. And it was only through this weird interaction with Indian British people and not feeling this sense of oneness that I realized that my friend is actually Indian, but I've been brainwashed my whole life to be Jamaican first and then your ethnicity. And so, in my opinion, London has many different cultures living and coexisting. But for example, my chef in London is Brazilian. She speaks very little English because all of her friends, all of her community are just Brazilian Portuguese. And there's not a mixing. And for me, when I hear multiculturalism, I feel like there's a mixing and oneness that I only observed in the UK for London 2012. There was an energy of one team, one vibe.
I think it changed after 2016. But the point that you've made is interesting because I'll give you an example. My daughter, my big daughter, she had a year out from University of Kent, which was Canterbury, and she went to the United States for a year. She went to the University of Miami for a year.
Okay.
And she said to me, she remarked that sitting in the canteen, you had the Afro-Americans over there,
Mm-hmm.
you had the posh girls over there, and you had this group over there, and it was very much segmented and cliquey.
Right.
And you had to fit in with one of those groups.
Sure.
And I think that probably is a representation of what society is like, that we tend to get drawn to our own to a degree.
Sure.
But it is about a personality that wishes to embrace other culture and
Sure.
get into other groups. But it is very easy and very comfortable to be, say, white and middle class and live in Suffolk or Essex.
Right.
And really mix with those particular people. It isn't really until you get into London, and you might live in southwest London, where you're going to get black people, Chinese people, Pakistan people,
Sure.
middle class white people, whatever, mixing together. Do they mix? To a degree, yes, but I accept your point. I think you're probably more right than me in that people tend to stick to their own.
I feel like you could have moved anywhere. You seem like the type of person, is that fair to say? It's not about Jamaica. You could have moved and been comfortable anywhere.
Yeah, we lived in Germany for 5 years.
Okay.
When I was in the police, I chose to go to Germany for 5 years. I was what they called at the time a drug liaison officer, a DLO, and my territory was Germany, Poland, and the rest of Europe, but it was Eastern Europe that was.
Sure.
But except Russia, of course. And I took that job because I've always wanted to travel. I like to travel. I like to experience new cultures. And I thought the way I could do that and use my policing experience was to go into that part of the service. So I was a DLO, drug liaison, for 5 years. I lived in just outside Frankfurt. My office was in Frankfurt. I travelled extensively around Germany, Switzerland, Poland, and really, really loved it. So I think I've always been a person who likes to travel, likes to experience new culture, love food, love wines, you know. So I guess that's just me.
And aside from headlines and all of these things, what would you think is the greatest misconception about living in Jamaica, just day-to-day life?
That it's full of criminals and crime, and it's not a safe place to come. And unfortunately, the US State Department sometimes preaches that as well. When you look at don't go to Jamaica because it's an unsafe place, I think that's practically unfair and unjust and unreal. I think, as I have mentioned already, that many people come here, they spend time here, they don't get robbed, they don't get raped, and they don't get murdered. They come here and have a good time, because most Jamaicans, they really embrace the fact that they have tourists coming in because it keeps their livelihood going.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, you could say that all-inclusive hotels have diminished that cross-fertilization of people coming here, leaving that enclave. Because when you go into one of these all-inclusives, you could be in Mexico, Dominican Republic, or Jamaica.
Anywhere.
Because you get the rum, you get the wines, you get this, you get the Michael Jackson lookalike in the evening on the stage, and all the rest that goes with it. And you could be anywhere, and you could stay there for 2 weeks and leave and not actually experience the country.
Sure.
And even if you leave it by getting onto a bus and going to Dun River Falls, that isn't really seeing Jamaica. But I've met other people who have come to Jamaica who haven't gone to an all-inclusive and have found their own way, rented a car, stayed at various places, Airbnbs or whatever, and they found the real Jamaica. And they're safe. They've not been hijacked, they've not been robbed, raped and murdered, and they've gone back and said Jamaica's a fantastic place.
How would you describe the real Jamaica?
Fun-loving, friendly, great music, love of sport. I think they're the sort of things that I would say. Friendly, as I mentioned, friendly, open. Just a great vibe here. It really is. It's just a good vibe. People are, generally speaking, really nice people.
I have a few quick fire questions for you. Tasty or juicy patty?
Juicy. But if I've got some money and I'm a bit posh, it's probably Devon House.
Curry goat patty at Devon House.
Yeah, exactly.
Best
Yeah,
patty.
exactly.
I'm so with you. That's why I don't include it, because there's no competition.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you prefer rum or red stripe?
Rum.
Do you prefer oxtail or curry goat?
That's a both question. I love both. Yeah, I love both.
How are you on pepper, by the way?
I love it.
Yeah, you can handle
I
some
love it.
spice.
Yeah, I can.
Do you prefer yam or cassava?
Yam.
Interesting. And cane juice or coconut water?
Coconut water.
If your life was a postcard, describe the picture to me.
I just saw sunshine when you said that.
Oh.
I saw sunshine, I saw beach, and just tranquility. That's how my postcard would be that.
Amazing. Thank you.
That was the first thought that came to my mind, so I hope that works.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.